here. My name is Aaron Stalker. I'm the Associate Director of Religions for Peace USA, and I've been with Religions for Peace USA for about a year now, working on various projects. But the webinar series is a new initiative by RFPUSA that we're utilizing to really emphasize two aspects of the strategic plan, and really that areas of work that really pervade all the projects of RFPUSA, and that's education and advocacy. These webinars are meant to really get to the heart of the conversations of the issues in which we're focusing. So for torture, we've brought together a group of religious leaders, all members of Religions for Peace USA, and a wonderful presenter today, Naeem Baig, ICNA, and NRCAT, the Islamic Circle of North America, and the National Religious Campaign Against Torture. What we'll do, the schedule for today, is we'll have about 30 minutes of just having Naeem sort of present some of the work he's done, as well as the importance of religious communities in the campaign to end torture. That'll last from around 3:30 to 4 Eastern Time, and then from 4 to 4:15 we'll make space for questions, and always making sure that we have a little bit of leeway time to allow Naeem to go a little bit longer than you, or for us to extend the question time longer too if need be. For those of you who can participate on the call, if you're joining in the teleconference, we ask that you would mute yourself during this time so that there's only Naeem speaking, that there's no feedback noise. Other than that, I want to sort of transition now just into a little bit more about who our presenter is. Religions for Peace is an organization that's made up of over 50 other religious communities and organizations across the United States, and the Islamic Circle of North America is one of the most active members. It's an executive committee member, and Naeem Baig has been a very active member of Religions for Peace for a number of years now. He's the current president of ICNA, the Islamic Circle of North America, and is extremely active in their social justice council, and has been the vice president and the executive director, of that for the past couple of years. He's very active in the social justice scene, in the advocacy scene, countering and the torture movement, and really is a big voice for the National Religious Campaign Against Torture. What I'd like to do now is transition into the conversation with Naeem and just turn the voice over to him and allow him to really begin this webinar. So thank you, Naeem.
Thank you, Aaron, and welcome, and thank you to all of our participants in today's discussion, and sharing of ideas on how to handle the issue of torture practiced in our country and also in the world. This is an issue which is very dear to the faith community, religious communities who are actively participating in the NRCAT and in Religions for Peace, and are actively participating to looking for ways and to find ways to address this issue. Islamic Circle of North America is one of the leading grassroots organizations of American Muslims, which was established in 1968, and today we have around 40 chapters, sub-chapters in different cities around the country. Our headquarters is based in Queens, New York, and we do have several other locations, and one of our offices here in Greater DC area, which is focused on participating with faith organizations in addressing the issues of social justice and social justice causes. And I was given this role to lead this social justice aspect of Islamic Circle of North America, and that is where my participation comes in this. ICNA is a member of NRCAT, National Religious Campaign Against Torture, which we know that it was started around 2006 when there were over 150 faith leaders who gathered in Princeton at the Princeton Theological Seminary to, after the Abu Ghraib pictures came up, to what should be a proper response from the faith communities on that inhuman treatment of other fellow human beings. And what is the role of faith communities? And that's how NRCAT came into picture, and which was established formally in 2007. And since then, NRCAT has done a lot of work. And if you go to the NRCAT website, nrcat.org, you'll find a lot of information, a lot of work that NRCAT has done over these last 6 years or so. And NRCAT leadership deserves a lot of credit and appreciation from the faith communities and faith leaders. There are 4 areas that NRCAT is actively engaged, which is to ensure that U.S.-sponsored torture of detainees never happens again, to end the use of torture in U.S. prisons and detention facilities, in particular the prolonged solitary confinement. And we know what happens in a solitary confinement. I used to have an intern whose brother was and still is in solitary confinement, and these people who are there confined 23 hours a day in a small cell of 8 by 10 or sometimes 8 by 8 size of a cell, where they do not see any other human being, and so many other things that happen to them, and they only get one call a day, which a family member does not pick up. That's it, their call is done. And in most of the cases that I know, many of these people who are in solitary confinement are kept in places which are far away from where their family lives. For example, in this case, about this person, he's in Colorado, but his family lives here in Northern Virginia. So it becomes very difficult for family members to sometimes go and travel and to avail their opportunity to see their loved ones. To end the third point NRCAT focuses on is to end U.S. support, direct or indirect, of any country that engages in torture, and to work for U.S. policies that help other nations stop their torture practice. And we know, you have heard about renditions, cases of renditions, and black sites, and involvement of our own CIA professionals, and in many cases directly involved in using torture against these people. And the fourth one is to end the bigotry and hatred that promotes the practice and acceptance of torture against religious people, religiously, ethnically, and other targeted groups. Since the fall of 2010, NRCAT has worked for an end to anti-Muslim bigotry and Islamophobia as well. So these are the 4 main areas that NRCAT is very much engaged and takes action when it comes to torture and its practices. Now, our members who are here today, some of you I know who are very active when it comes to standing up for justice and equality, for are leading faith organizations, building bridges and coming together for social justice, equality, for the rights of other people. Torture is an area, and the practice of torture, which became obviously out there in the world when the pictures from Abu Ghraib published, and those pictures and really did not help United States and our image in the world. Everywhere people saw, they saw not just one or two individuals who committed those acts against other human beings, but they saw that the leadership of our country endorsing those acts, our military leadership, our political leadership, and overall as Americans who were seen as supporting such acts, which we know is not, that perception is not correct. Torture is putting someone in that stressful, inhumane condition, using violence, using threat against them or their families. And when I was going through many of these different reports that are out there, there are some stories that we just cannot read. You, as a human, just forget about what faith I practice or you practice. But as a human, it was just very unbearable for me. And when I was thinking about today's program, today's webinar, I remembered there was a New York Times article which was published in, I believe, May of, it was 2005, where it covered two inmates who were tortured in Afghanistan, and they both died because of the torture. And this report was not done by any foreign agency or foreign government. This report was done by our own military professionals on what happened to those two detainees. And just quickly, I will, as I said, that I was thinking about it because it reminded me of what I read, and I couldn't forget that. And I thought that today's program is dedicated to one person, and his name was Dilawar. He was a taxi driver who was detained in December of 2002 as he drove past a U.S. base. He had some passengers with him, and when his taxi was stopped, our military police questioned them, and they were not really sure about the answer. So they were taken in and interrogated. And I will just quickly read on what happened to them. So this is reported by one of the interrogators who told investigators that when this taxi driver, Dilawar, spat in his face, he responded with a couple of knee strikes. And Dilawar screamed out, Allah, Allah, Allah. As you know, Allah is what Muslims use for God Almighty. So he screamed out, Allah, Allah, Allah. And my first reaction was that he was crying out to his God. So this interrogator said, everybody heard him cry out and thought it was funny. Everybody heard him cry out and thought it was funny. The report says it became a running joke, and prison guards kicked Dilawar just to hear him scream Allah. It went on over a 24-hour period, and I would think that it was over 100 strikes, this guard said. So during the interrogation, the severely injured Dilawar begged the translator to get him a doctor. The translator says he told the interrogators, but one replied, he's okay. He is just trying to get out of his restraints. An autopsy, which was later done by Coroner Lieutenant Colonel Elizabeth Rose, she told that Dilawar died because of blunt force injuries to the lower extremities, and it formed a clot which went into his heart, and he suffered heart attack. And Kamal told a pre-trial hearing that his legs had basically been putrefied. I have seen similar injuries in an individual run over by a bus. So just think that this person, and they knew that he had nothing to do with any, Al-Qaeda or Taliban. He was simply a taxi driver. And because of his cries, because of how he was responding to the torture that he was facing, his cries of Allah, really, and people, unfortunately, other human beings who felt it was funny, and this poor person, Dilawar, died because of that. As a faith communities, we have a great responsibility. The issue of Guantanamo Bay, as we all know, it's been so many years that many of the detainees who are there, and we know that many of them, and our government even says that, there are so many who had nothing to do with the war against terrorism. They were just simply at the wrong place at the wrong time. And in many cases, they were just given to the U.S. military by sometimes their, people who were against them, their tribal, differences with other tribes, and they were given to U.S. interrogators, and they were, for the last so many years, they are suffering in Guantanamo Bay. Now, as our government says that what to do with them, where to send them, but the point is that these people were brought there by us, so we must find a resolution for them. We must find a place for them. And as we, I am of the opinion that as we give asylum to so many people from all over the world, there's a few individuals who we know were completely innocent. And the only way that I see that we win their families and win their heart and offer them some consolation is that we say, okay, you can, bring your family or children to U.S. and find them something, a better life, a better future for them, a better future for their children. It is nobody else's fault. It comes back to us and our duty and our responsibility. Many people argue that torture helped against war against terrorism, and we found credible information, and we were able to target individuals. But there are our own army professionals, our own Senator John McCain, who had repeatedly said that yes, it is possible that you get some information, and he had been in prison. He was subjected to torture, and these are his words, that many times these detainees, they will give you the information they think will protect them from torture. So in many cases, in most of the time, as many experts, they tell us that the information that is given is not correct, and which in turn, takes our experts and their attention away from the real culprits, the real crime that happens. So I understand there are debates that it is beneficial or it is not beneficial, but according to many military experts, it does not help. It is not beneficial at all. Now, as faith organizations and as faith communities, our role when we are standing in our churches or in our synagogues or in our temples or mosques, we offer guidance to our community. We speak to our community from our pulpits and our members, and we guide them how to live their life. We help them how to live a righteous life, how to be better citizens of our country, how to help one another, how to take care of the needy and poor of our society and the oppressed members of our society. What is happening in our prisons in solitary confinement, and it is not about one faith or one community. I mean, this practice, if we are not going to stand up against torture, it is spreading many places in the world. It is already taking place in many places in the world, and we use those sites, and we used to call them black sites. Many dictators who are out there in the world, we use those dictators in using torture against many of the detainees. So this is where our responsibility comes in, that as we fight to end torture and its practices in U.S. in our prisons, by our interrogators, we must also stand up against practice of torture all over the world, and that is it is not an easy task. But when faith communities come together, things change. We can make a difference. We can stand up against these inhuman practices where human beings are thrown fake blood on them, or behaving with them in a way that culturally sometimes is not acceptable in many cultures. So these are the things that are not helping the United States. It is not helping our image. And there are reports after reports. Sometimes our media does not, I feel it does not really convey what are the feelings abroad. And when many of our faith leaders, I am sure, when we travel and we meet people outside, our image out there in the world is that everything is being accepted. These practices are accepted by our government, and it makes it difficult for religious communities when we travel abroad and we talk about U.S. and how faith communities are working for peace and justice, and they present these things that what are we doing about that? How are we ending? How are you standing up against Guantanamo Bay? When will these people see their families again? I do not have any answers when I stand in front of them. When these people who work with, in these communities, when they ask these questions, so really we do not have any answers. But what we can tell them is that we are not quiet. We are not just simply accepting all of that, but we are standing together. We are supporting one another. We present the work of NRCAT. We tell them what Religions for Peace is doing and how faith communities are coming together. There are a few things that I would like ourselves as a reminder. I'm sure some of you are probably already engaged in doing some of the things, but as a reminder to myself and to all of us. There is a verse in the Quran where God Almighty says that لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ, that certainly we created, and God Almighty is saying, certainly we created man in the best of the forms. So when I see these people being abused, these people in cages, these people in handcuffs and covered from top to bottom or in jumpsuits and in shackles and chains, I see this person a creation of God Almighty in that miserable state, and I see that we are not being thankful to God Almighty. We are not being we are not offering justice to the creation of God Almighty. Let these people, if they are criminals, if we can prove that what they have done was wrong, let these people be handled in the court. Let them see justice. I am for establishing justice. These people who have committed any crimes against us, against people, they should be handled properly in the court of law. But by practicing torture, we are hurting ourselves. We are hurting our own human feelings. And we are seeing the number of what is happening to our military, the cases of rape in our own military that has risen so many times, or the suicide that is happening in our military the huge numbers, and it is on the rise, it is affecting our morale, our character. So the first reminder to all of us is that God Almighty created this man in the beautiful form. So let us adhere to the commandments of God Almighty by practicing justice which is rooted in morality and ethics. People may commit wrong against us, but does it give us the permission that we also fell to the lower extremes and commit similar acts and similar crimes? We must ask this question. If we are standing at a higher moral ground, then we must find ways to address these issues from our level. We must not throw ourselves to the lowest of the lowest so that we also commit similar things and similar acts against them. I am for the security of our nation. I am for security. I am, as a father, I worry about my children. And many of us, we are worried about security of our communities. We are worried about security of our nation. We would like a peaceful nation. We would like a peaceful world. But it comes with standing up at the higher grounds of morality and ethics and standing up for justice for all people. We know from our history in America, when in the civil rights movement, faith leaders played a major role in the civil rights movement in fighting for the rights of all people. Faith communities must also stand today in standing up against practice of torture. Martin Luther King once said in one of his speeches that I quote, "This is what God needs today. Men and women who will ask, what will happen to humanity if I don't help?" And I say that we must also, these men and women today, must ask, what will happen to humanity if I don't act and stand against practice of torture? We must, my brothers and sisters, stand up together, use our leadership role in our communities in raising awareness against the practice of torture, in motivating our communities, in reaching out to politicians, and reaching out to politicians and seeking their support to end the practice of torture in U.S. and abroad. I also see that there is a great potential in our youth. Our youth today are very committed to issues of justice and equality. So we must, in our youth groups that we have in our churches or in our organizations, we must engage our youth groups. There are many resources available from NRCAT or other organizations who are actively engaged in stopping the practice of torture. There are videos available, there are books available, materials available that we can provide to our youth. Study guides, books, discussion documents are available. We not only discuss among ourselves, but also provide it to our youth and encourage them to participate against the practice of torture. It can happen at our places of worship, our youth groups. We can also engage at student bodies at colleges and campuses and seek their support in this common struggle for all of us. So with that, I thank all of you and for joining me today and Religions for Peace for this webinar, and we would love to hear from you, your comments, your suggestions, and your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naeem. That was thought-provoking and exciting. I really think you were right on to really charge us and agitate those sort of deep callings within each of our own religious traditions to become more cohesive and integrated in our movement together. I think you pulled extremely accurately from the civil rights movement to the to your own religious tradition. So I really appreciate that. What I want to do now is I want to open it up for anybody's questions. I know there are a couple people on the conference call and teleconferencing. So if you each of you are able to go ahead and speak your mind, please do. Those who are joining us through the audio broadcast, if you will send your questions through the chat function right below your video of Naeem or myself. That way I'll be able to announce them to the group and read them to all. So I want to really open it up now to anybody's any questions or comments. Please, go ahead. Well, I'll begin. I want to ask how you, in your own work, deal with either sort of apathy to this sort of issue, complacency, or just sort of ignorance. I mean, how do you engage members in your own religious community and the deep necessity of really tackling issues, and oftentimes when you approach people in this sort of discussion, it is framed in this issue as a large problem. Torture is something that's so massive, it's carried out by large state governments, it seems so far away and difficult to solve. But how do you frame the question, or rather around the reality of an issue, if we talk about it in closing Guantanamo Bay? If we talk about that, I mean, is there something sort of tangible that's doable? Is that helpful? What sort of tactics and strategies and conversation sort of maneuvers do you use to engage or members of your religious community on increasing their knowledge about this, but also giving them the sense that they can go and do something?
Well, it's a good question, but I think when it comes to the American Muslim community, we are a community that is seeing almost all of the people at Guantanamo Bay who are Muslim. So it's a very difficult thing. It's very challenging when Muslim community sees these people who are caged in Guantanamo Bay, that we are reading that sometimes guards are throwing away Quran or the items of religious and spiritual needs. So obviously it affects the Muslim community, that what is happening, why these guards are not being trained properly when they throw away the Quran, or when we know from in Afghanistan pages of Quran being burned or thrown in garbage. So it really gives a very negative impression of us Americans and our how do we deal with religious sensitivities. So when it comes to Muslim community, obviously there's a greater challenge. But engaging the community is where I also feel that the challenge is that sometimes Muslim community feels that there is Islamophobia out there. Muslim community is being monitored, mosques are being monitored, so people are scared sometimes for standing up for their own rights. But my role as a community leader is that I raise awareness. I talk about these issues. I encourage them that this is your right to ask these questions. This is your right to speak up against injustices. And it doesn't matter. Today, if we are not going to stand up against these kind of practices of torture, tomorrow it could be some other community, it could be some other faith group that would face, and at that time it would become difficult for us to say, that in decades ago or whatever time ago, we didn't see it, we didn't face it, we didn't take action against that. So we know that what happened to in Vietnam to our own army professionals, our own people, our own brothers, our own fathers. So we know all of that. And today we are on the other side. Today we are committing all of those atrocities. So it has to stop. And faith communities see that it is not, this struggle is not for what is happening today. This struggle is for what will happen in the future. And that is how I see it.
No, I think that's right on. Just everyone who's listening to as well. I know that Naeem had asked me to share a toolkit from NRCAT. So before the end of this session, I will upload that and share that to all of you all. I do want to transition now. I think there's a comment here from Sister Rosemary Stevens, who says that she is deeply appreciative of your presentation today, Naeem. She says, this topic is particularly dear to me, since in the 70s she was in Zambia, Africa, and during the Zimbabwe freedom struggle. And some of her friends were tortured and killed. She's so ashamed of Guantanamo and what has happened there. And I'm happy that as religious people, we are uniting against this. So she is sort of a comment from one of our attendees. So this is still a very appropriate and urgent sort of topic for all of us.
I would also recommend, while doing research on this topic, I came across with another report of the Constitution Project's task force on detainee treatment. I also found it very useful and for our own education and teaching others. And it is called the Report of the Constitution Project's Task Force on Detainee Treatment, and it was done by the Constitution Project. And it was done recently in 2013, actually.
Well, if there are any more questions, I'm going to right now upload this file for you all. The toolkit from the National Religious Campaign against Torture. If you are on the teleconference call and are wanting this toolkit, this is sort of what you'll be able to see it now on your screen. What I found particularly useful about this was a simple, the ability for us then to not only become educated, but also use this as a tool for advocacy, but then also a simple worship service here, a prayer for us. So I want to sort of offer that on the suggestion of Naeem. There are. Please go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I was going to say that I was talking to some young people yesterday, and I asked them, how can we increase awareness on this topic? And one of the things that they suggested that it's in an age of Facebook and Twitter and all of these social media sites. So using the NRCAT logo, for example, even though we are ending this June, the Torture Awareness Month, but whatever days are left in this month, so let us promote the NRCAT logo, for example, on our Facebook or Twitter handle. It can just create awareness and bring people or push people to learn more about it.
Absolutely. Well, that's part of the theme and flavor of these webinars. We're wanting to sort of relevant and current issues and topics. The next one that we're going to be doing in August will be with Ramzia Suleimana from the American Center for Outreach, and she'll be speaking on her activity in Middle Tennessee, which ties directly into this topic, Naeem, on torture, and she'll be addressing her activism and public policy advocacy work against Islamophobic sort of measures. There was a sort of an anti-Sharia bill that was nearly passed here in Middle Tennessee about 2 years ago, as well as an English-only bill. So any of you all who are tuning in today, I would urge you to look out for the next webinar. It will happen in July, not in August. Excuse me, it'll be in July. We'll send you a date for that shortly. If there are no more questions, I want to sort of wrap it up and thank you all for coming. I want to especially thank Naeem for sharing this time and knowledge and experience with us. It's a wonderful time, and I look forward to being able to do this more often with all of you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.